The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 6th ICLE webinar on Cities and Regions Talanoa Dialogues towards COP24 in Katowice, taking place today, Wednesday, 26 September at 10 o'clock and 16 o'clock Central European Summer Time. My name is Ji Sun Huang. I'm Senior Climate Advocacy and Policy Officer at ICLE World Secretariat. I will be a panelist as well as a facilitator of today's webinar. On behalf of ICLE, I would like to extend my heartfelt welcome to all of you for joining us today. Before we get started, let me give you a quick introduction on the technical side of today's webinar. Firstly, you are automatically muted as you join this webinar, and I would like to kindly ask you to remain so till the end of all the presentations in order to ensure smooth proceedings. Secondly, there is a feature where you can type in questions as you have them. So during any time of the webinar, please feel free to use this feature to type in your questions. Last but not least, in order to ensure the transparency, inclusiveness, and openness of information sharing, this webinar is being recorded. And upon closure of this webinar, the PPT slides as well as the recording will be shared with all the registered participants, as well as it will be uploaded on the ICLE YouTube channel. Now with that, let me move to introducing my fellow panelist, Mr. Yunus Arikan. Yunus is the head of global policy and advocacy at ICLE World Secretariat. Yunus is also the local governments and municipal authorities constituency focal point to the UNFCCC. Now with that, let us get started. Yunus, over to you.
Thank you, Jason. I also would like to welcome all participants from all around the world. Today, our webinar will have 5 main agenda points. We will mainly go through a very brief overview of the GCAS, Global Climate Action Summit in San Francisco last week. We will have some updates on the Cities and Regions Talanoa dialogues. There will be a discussion on the negotiation, in particular the Bangkok outcomes and the Ipcc process. We will spend some time on the COP24 planning, and we will very briefly go through the upcoming events. Just to recap, by the way, for those who have been familiar with our side events, webinars, we have been having these monthly over since the beginning of the year, and for summer we have given some break. But for September, we have particularly decided to have it twice. One before the California summit to make everyone aware of the upcoming events, but we thought it would be good to have another one immediately after California summit is over, because a number of things are evolving, especially with preparations for COP, also including negotiation agenda items that you will hear today. So that's why this structure of the webinar is having this diversity of topics. But we also would like to follow up, especially I think very likely we may have 2 more webinars in October as well, depending on how we'll advance in this process. So the Global Climate Action Summit in California, in San Francisco, was of course a very timely event, both for the national agenda and for the global agenda. In particular, considering the need to increase the pressure on the pressure and information on the national governments when they are negotiating the Paris Agreement workbook or work program, to make them aware that there is a shift in the global real economy, that transition to low carbon and higher resilient civilization or lifestyle has already started. It is already evolving, and there's already a tendency that this is now becoming a mainstream. The more the negotiators feel this, the better they can reflect their NDCs, and the better they can reflect the Paris Agreement work program. That was the logic of the California summit, and in that sense, we believe it delivered its purpose, both at the global level and especially also at the domestic level, considering the upcoming midterm elections in the US, and also engaging the various US stakeholders to the global processes. So if we look at if we have an overview, bird's eye view on what has happened during this summit, Global Action Summit, let's recall there are several reports that were released, and each of them had a specific mandate and specific mission, let's say. The first one was prepared by the new climate economy, and it was drafted or prepared or led by Lord Stern, and it was particularly trying to assess or quantify what is the advantages or opportunities or co-benefits of ambitious climate action. And in fact, this was a complementarity to the famous Stern report, which was released in 2006, which was at that time focusing on the costs of inaction, which the key message was that if you do not act on climate, you would suffer a lot. But the key message of this report is just a bit more, not just a bit, but even more beyond what is going off in action, but saying that if you take action, you would get a lot of economic and social and health benefits, both short-term and medium-term and long-term, both for your investors or economies, but also globally. That was the key message, how much potential and how much concrete benefits are available in the growing climate action. The second report was prepared by Yale University. It was an important aggregation of the impacts of climate action by cities, regions, and business in selected countries or in selected sectors. Of course, this is one of the most difficult information to capture. You have to make really numerous assumptions. There's a number of issues like double counting or territories, boundaries of these assessments. But I think this report was a really good demonstration that if the national governments can really take upon their stakeholders at the subnational level, be it local and regional governments or be it business or other actors, they can really increase the ambition of their, and that will give more confidence to the global climate action. Another report was entitled as Exponential Climate Action Roadmap. This was mainly commissioned and in partnership with Mission 2020, the WWF Sweden, and Stockholm Resilience Center, and actually the presentation was also very impressive on the first plenary of the Global Climate Action Summit in San Francisco by Christiana Figueres, who is a leading figure of the whole summit, and Johan Rockström, I may be wrong with the name, but they both made a very compelling presentation with the graphics and key data. This was showing that yes, the transition is already started, and if we advance or if we follow the path that is currently in action, we are expecting that emission reductions can double by 2030, and we can reach also climate neutrality. So that this was a positive response, saying that the new technologies, the new evolving concepts have a huge potential to evolve. So the opportunities and the potentials are there, and we need leadership to accelerate on these tracks. And one important report for us, of course, was the Global Covenant of Mayors 2018 report, which was an aggregation of the commitments and efforts of the cities, local governments who are under the Global Covenant of Mayors, which is around 9,000 plus, which was a very important indicator that their actions are also significant, and NDCs should take these into account. During the day of the summit, which was 1.5 days, we have tracked around 20 plus local and regional government representatives from worldwide. The final programs, of course, on the website, and this was also very promising in terms of our leadership there. In terms of outcomes, we could track, first of all, there's an official press release that summarizes the outcomes of those 5 challenge areas and initiatives that was announced. Specific announcement was delivered by C40 and Global Covenant of Mayors on Sustainable Communities Challenge Area, which was drafted or which was captured under 5 declarations: Deadline 2020, Fossil Fuel Free Streets, Net Zero Buildings, Zero Waste and Equity. These were signed by 89 cities and regions. There was another challenge area, which was to increase the membership of the Powering Past Coal Alliance, which was launched in COP23, and this was also presented with new signatories, which includes now Australian Capital Territories, Honolulu, Rotterdam, which are the new cities and regions joining this pact, and actually the Minister of Environment of the Australian Capital Territories was the one who announced this updates, which was also good for us. One of the core areas was 100% renewable energies. ICLEI was moderating this, and we are now aware that there are more than 400 cities and regions who have committed to 100% renewable energies worldwide. This is also an impressive figure. In parallel, it was not an official announcement of the summit, but we know it was released with various events that now worldwide there are more than 150 cities committing to divest their resources or funds from fossil fuels, and this is also very impressive compared to the evolution of this concept over the last couple of years, and local governments are one of those champions of this new movement. Other than that, of course, there were more than 4,000 participants. Numerous organizations were there, and then we are aware many of those participants of this webinar were also there. But from an ICLEI perspective, just if we can capture some of the highlights, we were part of one of the newest initiatives called Climate Heritage Mobilization, which was for us very interesting because it is bringing a new type of stakeholders, which is communities that are dealing with cultural and social heritage or historical heritage. And I think we were very happy to be part of their steering committee, and their engagement will help us to accelerate, especially to bring traditional knowledge, connection to indigenous people, as well as our assets in a more holistic and inclusive way, with a background on cultural values as well. Which is beyond just technical or engineering or financial solutions, but more social acceptable and also broadly accepted engagement. ICLEI released its climate neutrality work, which is summarized as going for low and no emissions, but connected to divestment, investment, and offset, including also domestic offsets, but also international offsets through donations to funds and also purchasing credits. And in the investment, we also include sustainable local procurement, sustainable public procurement as one of those key areas that we should take into account. We heard the global challenge, the champion of One Planet Charter of WWF, Uppsala from Sweden was the global champion, and we had 22 other national champions. ICLEI released two case study publications. One was on the divestment experience of the New York City, which was the largest pension fund in the US. This was presented by a series of events in collaboration with 350.org and other partners, and New York City as well, of course. And then there was another analysis of the ClearPath tool of ICLEI US, which was as trying to understand how climate change emissions, climate emissions are increasing or decreasing depending on what type of drivers, social, political, or technological. During the week, the European Investment Bank and Global Covenant of Mayors launched their new partnership on Green City Climate Challenge, which is a new financing pillar. And ICLEI has introduced Transformative Actions Program version 2.0 as a key element of this new finance instrument, where TAP, the Transformative Actions Program, will be one of the key project feasibility facilities to increase the number of locally driven projects to be resourced from this new finance tool. During the week, we also have announced that Mayor of Tishwane is now leading ICLEI's network on sustainable procurement. And we also have welcomed new board members of Global Covenant of Mayors, including mayors of Nagpur and Pittsburgh. Throughout these days, we had numerous side events, but the Low Emission Solutions Conference, the Beijing Environmental Authority, European Union, Assisi, Australian Capital Territories, Alameda are the ones that ICLEI has provided particular support and engagement, and we're very proud of our members and partners for raising the profile of our work globally and also in throughout the GCAS as well. With this, I'm handing over to Jisun to provide us updates on the Talanoa dialogues.
Thank you, Eunice, for your excellent recap on the GCAS. Now, we're moving to the updates on the cities and regions Talanoa dialogues. And I would like to start by recalling the two key pillars that we set for ourselves as our goals and the key vision statements for this whole initiative of cities and regions Talanoa dialogues. As remember, the first key pillar was to bring urbanization closer to the climate agenda. So sustainable urban development has to be married closer to the climate agenda. And the second key pillar was to strengthen multi-level governance, as was called for by the preamble language of the Paris Agreement. Now, based on all the reports that we've been receiving, we are seeing time and time again the affirmation of these two key pillars as to how important it is for us to keep on driving this forward. Now, with that, let me give you updates as of now, late September, on the cities and regions Talanoa dialogues. As of today, we are counting 54 sessions. Eunice, next slide, please. Yes, thank you. So as of now, we are counting 54 sessions of cities and regions Talanoa dialogues. 44 have been confirmed and took place, and 10 is to be confirmed very soon, and the 10 of them are scheduled for the September throughout November period. And now those of dialogues that are taking place within the 29th of October deadline of the second and last submission for the Talanoa platform for the presidencies, ICLE will capture all of those reports that we get as they come in. Now, the sessions are taking place in a total of 36 countries. So that means some countries are doing more than one Talanoa dialogues in their different cities. And then more than 75% of those dialogues are taking place in the Global South. So this is one of the affirmations that we are seeing when it comes to those areas where rapid urbanization is taking place. They're seeing more and more the needs of how to consider the NDC implementation into their urban development. So this is a great sign that we're seeing. And some of those key highlights have been captured in ICLE's contribution to the GIZ UrbanNet platform as an article format. So you can click on that hyperlink and then visit the article itself. But basically, we highlight some of the key insights that we gathered through the Cities and Regions Talanoa Dialogues outcomes. The ones from Togo, the Philippines, Indonesia, South Africa, and Ecuador are some of the ones that we highlighted. But there are many other numerous reports that we are willing to submit to the presidencies by the 29th of October deadline, as they all provide key insights on the three key questions of Talanoa dialogues of where are we, where do we want to go, and how do we get there. So in terms of the mobilization and the numbers of participants from all levels of government who took part in the cities and regions Talanoa dialogues and their announcements and key commitments when it comes to how all levels of government can come together to strengthen NDC implementation. And last but not least, when it comes to how to get there, there are many other initiatives and other stepping stones that we need to utilize and maximize together in order to make the second revision of NDCs by 2020 stronger. And not to mention, as was mentioned in ICLE's Montreal commitment, climate neutrality mandate is also part of the Paris Agreement by mid-century, and we will capture all these discussion outcomes in our submission. So based on all of this, the Secretariat will then produce a synthesis report for ministers by COP24, and then we have seen the latest document on the approach of the Talanoa dialogue at COP24, and more on this later I will cover in my presentation. Now, for the next 3 slides, I'm giving you the latest table of all 54 sessions of cities and regions Talanoa dialogues. As you can see, there are in total of 54 dialogues, and then we can kind of brush through this and then move to the next slides of the reporting sheet. So all the hosts and partners who are taking part in the Cities and Regions Talanoa Dialogues initiative have been provided with this template that ICLE developed as a recommendation and guidance as to how to structure the dialogues and how to capture key elements from them. And then those partners and our members are free to use this template in order to submit us their reports. And then these have been helpful guidance as to how to structure the whole dialogue, and also as to how to sort of shepherd the whole dialogue when different levels of government officials gather together to talk about these key questions that we suggest in this template. Now, with that, that has been the updates as of now of the Cities and Regions Talanoa dialogues, and I would like to move now to the Paris Agreement Work Program. This COP24 has many key elements. One of them is the Talanoa dialogue, but the other key, one of the most major outcomes of this COP, obviously, is the Paris Agreement Work Program, and then the mandate is for parties to finalize the negotiations by this COP. So now, before we get into the outcomes of the Bangkok text, I would like to recall and refresh our memories as to the Paris Agreement framework on how cities and regions have been brought closer to the global framework of the Paris Agreement. So in the Paris Agreement itself, which is in the annex of Decision 1 CP21 text, there are specific references to the role of cities and regions, as well as the importance of multi-level governance. Excuse me. And there is a preamble language of the recognition of the importance of multi-level governance. And then for specific articles, especially Articles 7 and 8, adaptation and loss and damage, there are specific references to the role of cities and regions. And at the same time, in Article 11, which is on capacity building, again, the importance of alignment of all levels of government for building capacity to support NDC implementation is mentioned. Now, the Decision 1 CP21 main text has several mandates, several mandates. And then in the preamble language, again, the importance of including non-party stakeholder support in implementing NDCs is mentioned, as well as the establishment of the Paris Agreement, the Paris Committee on Capacity Building, the PCCB, has given an important mandate of further implementing the strengthening of multi-level governance in the capacity building arena. Followed by, there is also the separate chapter on the pre-2020 action, and then the institutionalization of the Lima Paris Action Agenda, which now we inherited as the Global Climate Action Agenda. Global Climate Action is one of the more important mandates here, in addition to the technical examination process, as well as a separate chapter on the role of non-party stakeholders. Now, all of these has been our key elements to build upon when it comes to how cities and regions can align themselves within the Paris Agreement framework, and to pull resources together, pull their policy elements together to support national governments towards the long-term goal of the Paris Agreement. Now, this is the Bangkok text. Now, one of the key mandates that the parties have given to the presiding officers is to produce a textual proposal for to serve as the negotiation basis text at COP24 by mid-October. So the presiding officers are busy working, I suppose, in producing this reflections note, which will then contain the textual proposals based on the informal notes of over 300 pages. Now, these ICLE has looked at all the 300 plus pages of the informal notes of co-facilitators and co-chairs in order to find out where we are in terms of cities and regions, how they are framed, how they are included in key articles of the Paris Agreement Work Program negotiation as of now. And then there are several elements that we point towards when it comes to we would like to zoom in on. So firstly, on Article 4, which is on mitigation, NDCs, and long-term climate action. For mitigation, we do see parties are thinking along the lines of including the subnational and sectoral baselines as references. And then also for Article 6.4, which is about the new sustainable development mechanism, which is a market mechanism, parties are thinking along the lines of the importance of having local stakeholder consultations and having local sources and presence when it comes to having this new SDM structure. And for Article 6.8, which is on non-market approaches, parties again are stressing the importance of how the existing mechanisms of non-market approaches can be strengthened within the local, national, global context. So this is a good sign, and this further develops the multi-level governance vision of the Paris Agreement. And then when it comes to Article 7 adaptation, again there are several references where we can draw upon, where the role of local and regional governments can be further highlighted, because parties are now discussing the role of local communities' involvement further when it comes to adaptation communication, and then subnational development coming in closer to how adaptation policy solutions are going to be implemented. And also these different subnational and sectoral levels are now being discussed as to be part of this new adaptation communication. And then the final result, of course, we will see in Katowice, but based on these different elements within Article 7, we are hoping to see further guidance as to how cities and regions can come together on this to support parties. And there is another element of Article 10.4, which is on technology development and transfer. Again, the parties see the need for strengthening local, regional, national, global stakeholder engagement, and further strengthening local communities and authorities' role in supporting the technology framework of the Paris Agreement. And last but not least, the transparency article, Article 13, also has several references to the role of cities and regions. So the transparency has lots of different linkages within the different articles of the Paris Agreement. So for example, for Article 4, the NDCs and mitigation, again, the transparency text refers to the importance of including subnational and sectoral baselines as reference levels. And on adaptation, which is Article 7, the subnational plans and then national adaptation plans are all part of the discussion as to what kind of information needs to be reported by parties, and also the enhancing ownership of stakeholder engagement, including subnational policies, is also a part of the texts that we are reading from the Bangkok outcomes. And last but not least, there is a capacity building Article 11, for transparency, parties are discussing how to strengthen the linkages between regional, national, and subnational government policies in order to further support and identify the gaps when it comes to capacity building support under the Paris Agreement. Now, that was the recap of the Bangkok text. And based on this, the presiding officers, as I mentioned, will release a textual element for that. And then I would like to invite Yunus for quickly as to how the LGMA constituency will further build upon this Bangkok text.
Thanks, Chusun. It is really not so easy to go through all these 300-page document and with a complex structure. And I think this consolidating all of them in one sheet gives us a huge clarity on where we are. And as those who are familiar with the negotiations, having this does never guarantee that this will be the outcome, especially thinking that this will be shrink. This 300-page document will be shrink in a manageable size. And once, if this is accepted as a starting point, then there will be additional negotiations. This means that we have to follow a step-by-step approach in different phases of this work towards an COP. In that sense, our first priority is to have a deeper understanding of this text and provide some suggestions and express our support to the existing approaches, and if possible, provide some proposals in rewording of some of the texts. Maybe you have noticed there are some inconsistencies, but it could be better formulated maybe. We could track additional slots, additional, let's say, paragraphs where we believe it would be better to be included. And this could be our first step. Ideally, in our goal is that by early Monday next week, we would like to circulate a basic draft to all our LGMA partners so that we can consider to send this in by midweek, which is the middle of the first week, to the chairs, co-chairs who are drafting this, so that before they release their report or their document, they receive certain inputs from our side. Once this is done, then it is now the next phase is that from that moment onwards until COP in Katowice, we have to talk to the negotiators, we have to reach to the national governments to ask for their support to existing text or prepare their input so that additional references could be included. And this will be an iterative process throughout the COP in the first week especially. So this is our approach that we will come back to you. And of course, any other partners of LGMA membership or LGMA community, in case you have any additional analytical research or work on this kind of negotiation text, feel free to share with us or update us so that we can align our forces. Now we go to the next agenda item in the negotiations. This year we have a particular focus on Ipcc, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. One of the reasons is that this year there are two agenda items that is extremely relevant for us. One is that this plenary in October in Incheon, which is next week, will review the report of the city's Ipcc conference that was held in Edmonton in March. The Scientific Steering Committee have finalized the report, and this was officially submitted by the Secretariat of the Ipcc to the Ipcc plenary. It's one of those agenda items and preparatory documents. This is around 60-page document. It contains an overview which summarizes how the conference was held, the participation and management. Then it captures a couple of considerations by Ipcc members in their work, future work. And the second part is the full text of the global research agenda and its summary in a condensed form, which is around 10 pages. So in terms of the key proposals, you would notice that it has a long-term vision because this report will shape the future work of Ipcc until 2023, where the 7th assessment report will also have a special report on cities. Therefore, these proposals are focusing on additional actions that they may take over the next years. And it contains a variety of innovative approaches, like providing some spatial documentations for local level understanding, or engaging them in the drafting of the Ipcc reports. So this gives us a new way of work in the scientific community and the climate action. Therefore, we are excited. We hope that this would be well received by the Ipcc members, delegations. We feel that because the next agenda item is very, very heavy loaded, which is the 1.5 degrees, and because this report is relatively straightforward, we do not think there will be two major discussions, but you never know in negotiations, anything is possible. We assume some of the members of the Scientific Steering Committee will be in the Ipcc plenary meeting in order to respond any questions. We also have some Ipcc members, but there may be a participation from the networks or local governments. In case this is the case, please let us be aware so that we can coordinate. We are checking with ICLE Korea, Seoul Metropolitan Government, and other members in Korea for their participation, but it's not confirmed yet. So we will have to stay in touch in that sense. And if this is possible, there may be an intervention on this agenda item. One other point is that this report is also trying to inform the Ipcc delegations about not the Ipcc level or Ipcc-led initiatives, but also initiatives led by other stakeholders, because one of the strengths of this Ipcc conference was a broad collaboration about scientific and urban practitioner community. These key initiatives, for example, highlight the joint declaration on the science we need, which is a commitment to follow up this agenda by urban and scientific community. The Edmonton Declaration, which is paving the way for science-based targets at the local level. The Mexico City Conference, which also brings science policy interface. ICLE's pledge to work with the city's Ipcc community to convene regular dialogues at UNFCCC sessions, starting with the SB50 in June 2019, and Innovate for Cities, led by Global Covenant of Mayors. So these are also given to the Ipcc delegations as possible roadmaps outside the Ipcc process, but in strong synergy with what Ipcc will agree on. This next slide is relatively short. We deliberately kept it short because it's just tip of the iceberg. In fact, this spatial report on 1.5 degree is one of the biggest decisions of Paris, COP in Paris in 2015. It will be particularly presenting new information, especially for the future, raising the level of ambition that is urgently needed. This has been a big study, and there has been a huge number of mobilization of scientists, but also a lot of feedbacks on the first order and second order draft. In Incheon, during these 5 days, the negotiators will review the draft summary for policymakers in terms of the language strengthening or revising, but they will not make a discussion on the technical chapters or contents. So this has already been accepted by the scientific communities. But still, the final document, summary performance makers, are very important because these are the ones that the political leaders will rely on their decisions at the UNFCCC and other levels. The draft of this summary for policymakers already shared to the delegations and observer organizations. We also received it, but we are not allowed to share. We are sharing it on consultations for our positions, but it's not publicly made. The final version will be under embargo until first conference on Monday, 8th of December. And meanwhile, this is also a unique effort. Some of the lead authors, or some of the authors of the special report on Ipcc, 1.5 degrees report, have committed to work for an additional supplementary document that is synthesizing this complex document to the priorities and needs of the local leaders. This is led by the lead authors, but also supported by the Global Covenant, C40, and Rockefeller Foundation. There will be several cities, experts or staff or leaders who would contribute to this discussion paper or technical papers, and the goal is to release this in COP in Katowice. So now we are going to our agenda at COP. Here in this slide, we wanted to summarize as key headlines. One important thing is, of course, any mobilization in any COP is mainly in the hands of the host country and the presidency. There was a last dialogue with the representatives in New York City during the Climate Week on Monday. It has become clear that the presidency is still working on final details of the zoning, capacity planning, and access of observers to the COP. Of course, these details, these numbers, these procedures define how we are engaged in the negotiation, or at least observe the negotiations, engage in the side events or thematic activities, or mobilize our delegations in terms of their availability in the specific events. That's why it's very hard to make any assumption at this stage, as long as this is not available by the presidency. We also are hearing from rumors or from informal sources or from media that the COP presidency is working on, COP24 presidency is working on 3 declarations on just transition, forests, and electric mobility. All of them are strongly relevant to local and regional governments, of course. We have not been involved in the drafting as ICLE or LGMA or constituencies so far. We hope there will be an invitation to provide comments. We are aware that these declarations are proposed to be adopted by the heads of state at the beginning of the COP or during the high-level segment. We don't know the full details of it. But of course, these declarations are providing some political, let's say, vision. But in terms of binding commitments, this is not too much, let's say, having any legal framework, but there is a strong political background on these topics. And of course, these are all relevant issues in the climate action, which is really diverse, and now it has to be more holistic with taking into account the new technologies and also the sustainable development goals as well. As we say, delegation quotas for observers are still to be defined by the Secretariat based on the information by the presidency. The same goes side events. We don't know how many of them will be approved and when and where, what size of the rooms are there. We also know commercially based pavilions, which is the places where parties host their delegation offices or their, let's say, publicly participating events. These are requests are submitted by 30th of September, and according to the logistical arrangements, then the secretariat will, or presidency will define the sizes and the places or layouts or locations of these pavilions. At the moment, we don't have any official layout of the COP24 venue. Therefore, it's hard to provide any guidance on that. Considering all these, let's say, available information, our preparations for COP24 is as follows. Yes, we will be providing inputs as much as possible in the opening and closing and then in the various negotiation items, but we would like to focus our activities in a certain period which is extended from 7th to 12th of December, and we would like to suggest that this could be announced as a multi-level action days of the COP24. This could include events of Marrakesh Partnership, which Jisun will go through it shortly. Talanoa dialogues, of course, on 11th and 12th. The various side events of the UNFCCC official side event and exhibit agenda by LGMA members. Side events at the pavilions, as I said, there's no clarity yet, but we are expecting European Union, Germany, China, NDC partnership, or some others will have slots reserved for local and regional governments. On 10th of December, Monday, EU Pavilion will be reserved for GCOM, the Global Covenant of Mayors, for full day. It's a great opportunity, of course. And City of Katowice will also host a reception on the Monday evening. This is important so that we can convey our final messages to the negotiators, where ministers will start to participate in the process on 11th of December, Tuesday. So the day before, local and regional governments give one more push and one more underline their priorities and inputs to the process at the highest level through the hosting of the City of Katowice. And this will also be the time where we will also communicate our key conclusions from cities and regions Talanoa dialogues. Jason, maybe you go through the Marrakesh partnership, but considering the time, I suggest you try to do not go too much on the details. This time we were a bit long, so try to condense so that we give space and time for our partners who are attending this webinar to interact by raising questions or expressing their inputs from their sides. Yeah, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Yunus. So building upon Yunus's high-level update on the COP24, now we're getting into different segments. So the first thing is the Marrakesh Partnership for Global Climate Action, the MPGCA. I would like to give updates on the two quick elements of the e-book and the action tracker. So as you know, this year the Human Settlements thematic group focal points is ICLE and Energy for SD. And the work on the e-book is going on by the Secretariat. That's deadline for submissions that non-party stakeholders would like to highlight was last week, Friday. And then the Secretariat has communicated that the elements such as workshop elements and then other initiatives and different outcomes emanating from key events this year will then feed into the e-book structure. And then any other elements that non-party stakeholders wish to highlight had to be sent by the 21st of September deadline. So now it is in the hands of the Secretariat to support the champions in producing this document. And the action tracker is also work on progress, and then the final version of it is going to be published by the end of October. And this is the constellation of events based on the latest information that we have as of now, where you can see 7 action events of the 7 thematic groups under the MPGCA, and then the opening will then be a press conference on the 6th, and it will be finalized by a high-level mandated event by champions on either 11th or the 12th. And on top of that, we have 7 SDG roundtables on SDG 8, 9, and 12, and cross-cutting resilience roundtables. There are 2, one on climate finance, the other one on resilience. And then there's 2 additional roundtables on thematic areas of land use, water, energy, oceans, and transport. Now, with that, we can look into the guidelines document of the MPGCA released by the Secretariat. So the templates for concept notes have been disseminated. Each of the 7 groups need to finalize this. The first preliminary deadline for that was last week Friday, and then there will be a confirmed in-person meeting on the 9th and 10th of October in Bonn to finalize all these different concept notes in person. And then the final version of all of this will then be published towards the end of October on the Ipcc website. Now let us move into the Talanoa dialogue at COP24. The approach document has been recently released by the Talanoa platform of the Secretariat. So as was mandated by COP23 decision 1CP 23, the wrap up of the preparatory phase will be during the first week of the COP, where there will be an opportunity to consider the implications of the IPCC's special report on 1.5. And the political phase will then be started on the 11th December, Tuesday at 9 a.m. And then what's notable here is that it is indicated that a limited number of non-party stakeholders will be invited to join for the high-level roundtables on the same day, on the 11th December, for half a day. And then all of this will then be closed, finalized in the afternoon of Wednesday on the 12th December. So that's the outline of how the high-level Talanoa dialogue will take place at COP24, and we're expecting more detailed announcements and further guidance to be released by the presidencies in due course. Now, with that, I would like to give the floor to Yunus again towards the COP24 and other events that we need to consider.
Thanks, Jason. And as we're discussing on Talanoa, we just heard today, and we circulated to our partners through the mailing list, as that on Friday, the presidencies will have a webinar on COP24 preparations, especially for Talanoas and others. So we encourage all partners, those who are able to do so, could join that webinar. And we assume this will also be recorded, and the details can be shared later on. We do not want to spend too much time, but obviously the agenda was not too much new things so far. We know there's a pre-COP in Poland, and this would be the first feedback from the national governments to the informal document that the chairs will release. Therefore, this will be important. How much or how the local regional governments or stakeholders in its entirety will be engaged in this pre-COP, we don't know yet. We'll have to watch and see. For us, the local and regional governments, Urban 20 in Buenos Aires is important, and biodiversity COP in Egypt is also an important avenue before COP. Beyond COP is not new information. This is the same slide we used, but the key message is that 2019 will be important for the UN Climate Summit, and there will be numerous opportunities, especially in June and May, also in March. So we will see, of course. Who would host COP25 will also be an important discussion. This will depend on the elections in Brazil in October, and I think this will be finalized at COP, that we will learn who would host the COP. With this, let's open the floor for contributions and clarifications or questions, if you like. Yeah.
Thank you, Yunus. Ladies and gentlemen, the floor is now open. You can raise questions, raise hands to ask questions to us, or you can type in questions you might have. At the moment, I see no questions typed in the questions box, nor do I see any hands raised at the moment. I hope that means we were crystal clear. Or maybe,
well, it was condensed, and it was a very heavily loaded session. It's true, but it is what it is. We are now in the COP mode.
Okay, I see a hand raised by Jeet. Okay, Jeet, you have the floor.
Yeah, good.
Can you unmute yourself, Jeet?
Hello, sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Yes, I was just wondering about if you could repeat what you said about there being some sort of special report on the implications of 1.5 degrees for local governments. It was a bit, my connection was a bit choppy then, but I believe there's going to be a special condensed report which is going to be released. And I just wanted to know when that would be.
Okay, so this refers to the October IPCC 24 units. Would you like to take this?
Yeah, thanks, Jeet. This is an initiative of some of the authors who are involved in the special report on 1.5 degrees, and there was a proposal to draft a special extract from this report that is containing some priority information or implications for local and regional governments, and this is led by the authors, but C40 Global Covenant and Rockefeller is supporting this. Our colleague Seth Schultz is leading this process. He's one of the lead authors, or he's one of the authors of Special Report on 1.5, and he was also the co-chair of the city's IPCC, as you know. He is now on the way to Korea in Incheon. He will join these sessions. He's already started with some consultations with the lead authors and several cities. And then we will wait for their further updates on that sense.
Thank you, Yunus. Jeet, do you have any follow-up questions on that, or was this? Hope this answered your question.
Yes, that answered the question actually. Thanks.
Thank you. And any other questions? I don't see anything on the questions box at the moment. Okay, I see Virginia, right? Vanya. Virginia, yes, Virginia.
From the climate group, yeah.
Yes, she just gave us thank you for the presentation in the question box, and we thank you for attending our webinar. And yes, so I guess
that was a nice conclusion.
Right.
Yeah, thanks to all. I think it was good that we were able to share with you all these latest progress, and especially on the Bangkok text and other documents. I think we will stay in touch via emails, and feel free to share any information that we missed or you want us to take into account. Please don't hesitate to share with us. With that, we wish you all the best.
Great. Well, still, I see no other hands raised. Is there anything? Because we have 6 minutes left, and then maybe there are some points you might want to elaborate further on while we wait for further questions.
I see a couple of colleagues. Agat from C40, Amy from Yale. If they would like to share any additional points about GCAS, this could be one option if you like, but nobody has to do necessarily, because this was meant to be a sharing, and with many of those documents are also available. So, but thanks a lot for your participation and also your efforts in that regard. So now we have a question, I guess.
Yes, it's from Anthony. So the Talanoa Dialogue Approach document released, yes, it has been. So the presidency, as you know, has set up this early this year, this talanoadialogue.com, if I'm not mistaken, which is the platform where parties and non-party stakeholders can go in to check in the latest elements from the presidency, then also to submit their documents. So that's a place where you can see there's a presidency's corner on the top menu bar, and then this document has been recently released there, where you can see how the presidency envisions to unfold the high-level Talanoa segment at COP24. So I believe we also provided the link on the PPT. So once you have this PPT as a PDF document, upon closing of this webinar, you can simply click on this and then go to this document. It will lead you to that. Now, I have a question from Agath. nothing to add from her side, but she thanked us for this webinar. So thank you, Agath, for your kind comment.
Maybe to the question of Anthony, I know Anthony just joined our loop, let's say, or family. Maybe from Karina or Jeet, you can get the document because we shared it last week. But as Jason mentioned, you can also find it on the web, but also it will also be available on the PDF link on this webinar.
All right. I guess with 3 minutes to go, I guess I give the floor to you, Eunice, for your closing remarks now. I see no other questions.
Yeah, I don't think we have any additional points to add. Let's stay in touch and see how things will evolve in the next couple of days.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much once again for joining us today. Actually, I just have one question from Amy. So thank you for this information. Nothing further to add from Amy's side, other than to invite everyone to take a look at the report we shared here. Okay, so
this in the first slide on GCast at the moment we only made the list of some reports and events, but we will try to provide as much as possible to the links. And the links to reports, including Yale University, that Amy is one of the authors with Angel, will also be included there. Thanks for reminding, and congratulations once again, Amy, for this really, really very helpful work and opening a lot of doors for all of us.
Fantastic. Okay, with that, I believe we are now closing our webinar. Once again, thank you everyone, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us today. As I mentioned earlier, all the PPTs and the recording of this webinar will be shared with you through the ICLEI Cities and Regions Talanoa Dialogues website, webpage, as well as the ICLEI YouTube channel. So please stay in touch, and then thank you so much for joining. This webinar is now closed.